Hi, it's Ileana, and I'm going to be doing an update today on discussing what I have learned about trying to 3D print the Metatron Tesseract cubes that I had just recently modeled and rendered in colors of dark blue, light blue, dark purple, and light purple for the purposes of meditating with these Metatron Tesseract cubes and also having them in my crystal grids. So I had actually wanted to know the retail costs of 3D printing these cubes professionally from an industrial standpoint of contacting a company to 3D print them. And I had contacted 3D RE, which is a Surrey, BC, Canada-based company, 3D printing company, and CNS design, so they could 3D print the Metatron Tesseract cubes from PLA material filaments, which is a plastic-like material. It's strong and it allows the vibrancy to create those colors in the various color forms that I had chosen. It would be much harder to 3D print these in metal because you have copper, you have brass, and then if you want to gold plate something, you have to go have it in gold plating. You have to dip it to change the colors. So it's not as easy to do it in metal. So what I learned is that if I wanted to have a 3-inch Metatron Tesseract cube printed for me, 3D printed, it would cost me $100 Canadian. If I wanted a 4-inch Metatron Tesseract cube printed for me, it would be $225. And if I wanted a 6-inch Metatron Tesseract cube to be printed for me, it would be $500. And that includes the 3D printing and also the cost of the PLA filament materials in the colors that I wanted. And I wanted basically several variations of colors. So the owner of 3D RE was very kind to me, was very honest and upfront, because I asked for a quote, an estimate to how much it would cost to print 6 cubes for the Metatron Tesseract cubes, so 6 in total. And I got the various price points. So if you choose to do it industrially through a professional 3D printing company, they charge for cost of materials, cost of time to 3D print an item, a model that you've already rendered. So the more time it takes to print something, the more it costs. Like, for example, the 6-inch Metatron Tesseract cube, that was for meditating, holding it in my hands and meditating with it. So that's $500. The larger it is, the more time it takes to 3D print. And it would take 4 days to 3D print a 6-inch Metatron Tesseract cube in whatever color I want. And again, that's $500 Canadian. So it could range from $900 to $2,000 something in Canadian currency to do that kind of project. The other option is to buy your own 3D printer. The one that I liked was Creality Ender 3. So Creality Ender 3 S1, that's the newest printer. And that costs about $389 Canadian or USD. I'm not sure which currency it's in. And plus there's taxes, and plus there's the material costs of the PLA. So it's about 500 something is what I figured out the budget would be. And these 3D printers, the Creality is large, so it goes in height. It goes like this. It's not a small printer, it's pretty large. So you would need a good size table to put it on to be stable, because it has a printing plate and it has the 3D printer item aspect that's doing the 3D printing. And you can use various PLA materials to 3D print the exact shape that you want, but you have to know how to do 3D modeling rendering. You have to know how to work with something like AutoCAD or another program, and then how to input that information once you've modeled the items, how to input that into the 3D printer, set up the temperature settings, set up the parameters for how long the item will be printed for. It could be hours, it could be days, depending on the size factors that you're going for, the colors. So you have to know the heat, the temperature. You have to know how much time to program into the printer and the shapes you're working with. So those are very important factors that you have to know how to do when you're going to be working with 3D printing on your own. If you choose to go the route of 3D printing these Metatron Tesseract Cubes, if you choose to do it through self 3D printing, you need to know how to work with a 3D printer, and that takes time and experience to learn that. It's not like going to print something from a piece of paper where you just send it to the printer. All you have to do is tell it portrait, landscape, color, black and white, and what quality you want. It's a little bit more hands-on. You have to learn how to work with the parts of the 3D printer, how to assemble the printer actually, to choose the right type of 3D printer for you. And I was going after quality when I was looking at 3D printers, and the Creality Ender 3 S1 has good quality. It can print pretty good things from PLA materials, different types, different colors, thickness layers as well. But you have to, when you get the 3D printer, when you order it, you have to put the parts together. If you want super extra quality, there's add-on parts to it that you can buy and put on to it as well. So you can work with how much bells and whistles you want on your 3D printer. To have the stable printing plate, to have, you know, heat resistance, all that stuff, the quality control of it, the more you have on the printer in terms of stabilization and other things, the better quality will be. And those are attachment parts that you can play around to choose with if you want. If you want something beyond just your typical 3D printing experience, you can have add-ons to your 3D printer to improve the quality. And again, these printers, the size, these 3D printers, the size of what they could print from an industrial standpoint, like a professional 3D printing company, like 3DRE, when I requested a quote for a 7-inch Metatron Tesseract Cube, they told me it would be $600 and that they could only print it in separate parts and that they would have to glue it together to make it a whole. So even with huge industrial 3D printers, it's still, if you go up in height, like, and width, and, you know, the higher you go up in size, the harder it is to 3D print items. So even though the technology has improved quite a bit, if I wanted that 7-inch Metatron Tesseract Cube, it would have to be printed in several different parts and be glued together. And I said to the owner of the company, I don't want anything glued or printed in separate parts. So I went down in sizes. And if you get your own 3D printer, you have to be mindful of the size as well. I don't know, honestly, if the Creality Ender 3 S1 can print up to 6 inches. So I actually contacted an expert in 3D printing who has his own Creality, that new version of the printer. I sent that person an email because I really liked his reviews on YouTube about it. So I sent him that question. Can that printer print a 6-inch item or not? I'm waiting to hear the response. At this stage, honestly, I'm not going with a printing company because that's too expensive for me. Even a 3-inch Metatron Tesseract cube, that's $100 per cube, Canadian. It's if it was like $50 per cube or even 60, I would go for it. And if it was like $100 for the 4-inch cube, I would go for it. But at $225 for a 4-inch cube, I'm sorry, that's too expensive. You know, price ranges are pretty high for professional 3D printing. So if you choose to print these Metatron Tesseract cubes, you have to learn a little bit about 3D rendering and modeling of the colors, the sizes, the shapes, because I had to factor in size and color. The model itself was already modeled at yagi.com. So I didn't have to put all the shapes together. I just had to size the Tesseract Metatron cube correctly to size because it comes in an STL file. And before you download the STL file, make sure you have the proper proportions and it's in millimeters. So you have to also do a conversion, millimeters into inches, just to see the aspect ratios, and choose your colors and then write down the colors that you selected, the custom colors. Because again, I wasn't sure if the color schemes were going into the STL file. It wasn't that intuitive. So I had to be very careful with sizing and color selection. So I wrote down all the colors and I actually did screenshots of all the files of the rendering process to show you guys, which was in the previous video that I did. So at this stage, I am choosing to go with my other idea with printing a crystal grid where with the crystals that I had put in and also the 3D rendered model of the Metatron Tesseract cubes in light purple and red into the holographic version and virtual version of the design of what it would have looked like if it was 3D printed with crystals and the cube in the middle of the crystal grid. To me, it still has the same vibration of it's going to work for me. I can meditate with it. And I'm going to put it in a clear glass frame. And I have a beautiful meditation display table that has these little holders for crystal bowls with crystals and this nice tab holder to put the crystal grid design itself with the image of the Metatron Tesseract cube in the middle of the grid and crystals around it. I've learned how to do virtual holographic modeling, 3D modeling of crystals and these Metatron Tesseract cubes, how to put it in on a base, the base of what will hold the grid, where the crystals will be on, and the middle of the Metatron Tesseract cube in the middle of that grid. And the grid base is a Metatron cube, a whole Metatron cube. That one, I've learned also, for me, it's important to have spheres in my Metatron cube. That's why what I modeled was a Metatron Tesseract cube with spheres. So to me, there has to be a lot of sacred geometry programmed into these Metatron cubes. You can program in the Merkaba, you can program in cubes, spheres, flower of life. You can program in a lot of different things You just need to know how to do aspect ratio and shapes. So there is an intuitive process involved when you are learning 3D modeling and rendering. So this is what I've learned, and this is my update talking about this learning experience. It's been amazing. It would be a learning curve, even if I bought a 3D printer right now, it would be a learning curve to learn how to use it, to learn how to work with the materials, to 3D print objects, and I would need a modeling rendering program to render the Metatron Tesseract Cubes according to the 3D printer that I would get. So I would have to have an idea of this Metatron Tesseract Cube, but I would have to re-render it. And it's an interesting aspect to learn and to do it. And maybe one day I will. Just learning about the experience was fun. And I'm still going to be incorporating the Metatron Tesseract Cube in my crystal grid designs. I'm printing it on paper in high vibrant color, putting it under the clear glass frame with a Metatron grid base that's in purple and blue and yellow with the virtual crystals around it. And I'm going to be meditating to that on that beautiful meditation display table. I'm going to be sitting there or standing beside it, connecting with the energies and the crystals, the crystal bowls beside this crystal grid Metatron Tesseract Cube in the middle. So for me, I got to do the 3D rendering and modeling of the crystal grid. Even though I'm using holographic and virtual aspects to design it, it's still energetically vibrant and active, as if I had 3D printed the items themselves. So I can connect through meditation to the frequency and the energy of the items, the sacred tools. So I'm still getting my Metatron Tesseract Cube, 2 of them, in light purple and red, just in a little bit of a different aspect than I expected, but I'm still quite excited about that. Even that being in my holographic virtual crystal grid that's being printed in a 3D aspect ratio. And I'm going to my print lab in a few days to do it. I'm very excited to see how it turned out. And I actually rendered the whole idea, how this would look on the display table. So, and I'm creating a whole PDF documentation that I'll link in the video description. So you guys could see the whole process of what I was doing. I actually documented it in a report because I don't just like to talk about what I experienced. I also like to put it in a report format so people can also learn about what I did and what my experience was with it. So 3D printing is still an expensive thing to do. So for me to feel comfortable 3D printing what I want, I need the pricing aspects in the industrial printing, professional 3D printing to be lower. Perhaps there's other companies beside 3DRE that have less pricing. I contacted a few other companies. We'll see what their responses would be. But if it's still similar price ranges, I'm sorry, that's too expensive for me at this point. And to just buy a 3D printer just to print 6 items. Again, I don't plan to be in the 3D printing business. To me, this is a spiritual experience to print a few Metatron Tesseract Cubes, to work with them, to see how it works in meditation and in the crystal grids, and report back my findings to you guys to inspire you to try similar things. So I'm being very honest with what my experience with all of this was through this process and project. And let me tell you, I still wanted a Metatron Tesseract Cube in my crystal grid, and I'm getting it. I'm going to my printing lab and I'm going to set up the vibrant colors to print it in my crystal grid. I just went to the store and bought the clear glass frames for it. I have the table, I have everything ready for it, and I'm excited. I'm excited to go and meditate with it. Because to me, it's real, to me, it's beautiful, still has the same energy and connection. I'm just not holding something that's sort of plastic-like. Maybe it would have looked great. I'm not sure. That's the thing. Until you have the actual item in your hands, I'm not sure. It could be great. Again, if the 3-inch Metatron Tesseract Cubes were at $50 instead of $100 per cube, I would go for it. So the prices need to be a little bit more friendly and optimal for those of us that are trying to build our own sacred tools from sacred geometry. So it's really about what you feel comfortable with doing for your 3D printing needs, what your comfort level with pricing is, knowledge, what you want to learn if you're going to be 3D printing these items yourself, how comfortable you are with the whole process, learning process. For me, again, I looked at the long-term possibilities, and I don't want to be in the 3D printing business. I want to help educate people about the possibilities of what you can do, go out and try for yourself based on my experience of the reviews of this whole process. So it's about knowledge, gathering knowledge, researching, discussing it, thinking of all the options and possibilities, because there's many different options for 3D printing. If anybody was to find a company that has decent pricing to 3D print these beautiful Metatron Tesseract Cubes, I don't mind the plastic-like feel. I don't mind it. If it was, the pricing was reasonable, I would go for it. So it's comfort level, and I want the vivid colors. I want the colors, and I want the shape to be exactly what it should be. So for me, it's about the color vibrancy, it's about the proper shape. And I would not want something 3D printed in 7 inches that would be in separate parts that would have to be hot glued together. No, it has to be one item, a whole solid item. And that would be at 6 inches and lower. So again, I feel comfortable holding in my hand a 4-inch Metatron Tesseract Cube or a 6-inch one. And I like the solid aspect of having the spheres of light intersect with the lines, creating the Metatron Tesseract Cube. This is my own personal preference. You can 3D print Metatron cubes in different shapes, sizes, and even program different sacred geometry into it. So it doesn't have to be just the Metatron Tesseract Cube. You can create other shapes like the Merkaba, the cube, the flower of life, spheres. You can play around with it. It's sacred geometry, and you connect to it on the energetic level. You would know what shapes are right for you. I just like the classic Metatron cube with the Merkaba in it, or the modified Metatron Tesseract cube with the spheres. To me, that's what I'm drawn to work with energetically, and I'll keep exploring this topic. I'm actually very excited because I'm working with a friend whose name is Dana, and he's quite interested in Metatron cubes as well. We've been chatting back and forth about the symmetries, about the numbers, the shapes. He's going to be on my show soon, and he's going to show me what he's working on, his 3D render models of a Metatron cube. So that's coming soon. So I look forward to what he shows us and what his idea of making a Metatron cube is like, and what he can tell us more about the processes, his ideas, and if that's because he's very passionate about it as well. So I look forward to that and to learning more information about the Metatron cubes. I'm also going to be interviewing Victoria Reynolds, who's writing a book about Metatron cubes. So that's going to be a wonderful experience. She's a luminary, and I want different perspectives on Metatron cubes and sacred geometry. I'm very open-minded to these perspectives from information coming in from different people who are connected to sacred geometry. And Dana approached Victoria to get her inspired to be connected to Metatron cubes. She's connected to the concepts of New Earth. She's very wise, and she's very good at putting together information, spiritual knowledge. So she's dedicated quite a lot of time to writing her own book about the Metatron cube and how that creates New Earth. So we're going to be discussing that, and that's coming up again very soon as well. That's a second interview. So there's going to be several different parts discussing the Metatron cube, how it works, what it does, how people connect to it. So I have an introduction to the process of what a Metatron cube is, the process of how to model it, adapt it, modify it, choose all the colors, the shapes, and even almost start the process of 3D printing it in several different options. So I wanted to talk about that today. So thank you so much, and namaste.